Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today. I'm Renee Williams, and I'm here with my co-host, Billy Thomas, and we both work for the University of Kentucky in the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources. And you know, Billy, we've got a packed show, everything from wood to water. I think the only thing we're missing is maybe wildlife with Dr. Springer.
That's probably it. No, today is really great. And thank you all for being with us today. We appreciate you joining us. Whether you're via Zoom, you can interact with us via the chat pod, or if you're joining us via Facebook Live, use the comments section. But Renee, we have got really an awesome show today. I am so excited. We have Joyce Bender. Joyce is a huge resource for Kentucky. She has done so much work over the years. She worked for the Nature Preserves Commission for a long time. But even since her retirement, she's still very active and very involved. She's going to be talking about the eco-regions of Kentucky. So regardless where you're at, there's going to be something for you. And then we have Darren Morris. He's going to be our kickoff with the White Oak Initiative. So this has been an ongoing project that we've started here in Kentucky, but it extends way beyond Kentucky. And Darren will be talking about that as we go forward. And then we have our ever popular Tree of the Week segment with Laurie. So I'm really excited about today's show, Renee.
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, we've got a lot planned for today. So why don't we go ahead and get started? So Darren, if you want to pull up your video. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. How y'all doing?
We're good, Dan. Glad you could join us.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about what you're going to be talking about today.
Well, the White Oak Initiative, by now, everybody that frequents this show has probably heard those words and realize that it's about white oak management and white oak forests. So today I'm going to focus on the regeneration part of it, which is very key with the successful management of white oak, and hopefully make those listening a little bit more aware and better understand what's going on out in the woods.
All right, great. Well, we're looking forward to it.
Okay, so the White Oak Initiative is healthy white oak forest for generations to come, right? And that sounds good, but that's not exactly that simple. White oak continues to be very sought after in the forest. It's in high demand. We know that. Researchers have known for over 30 years that white oak's not regenerating enough to replace the old white oak trees in our forests. And that's a problem. So 50 years from now, when there's a shortage of white oak, we'll probably more, become to realize that. However, there's things that we can do now to maybe solve that problem. White oak's important for industry. It's important for lumber, of course, flooring, furniture, Spade Cooperage, the bourbon industry. They're definitely concerned about white oak and have been important in driving this White Oak Initiative. Conservation groups, wildlife biologists, foresters, forest managers are all part of the White Oak Initiative and white oak management. And white oak is a cornerstone species, and that means that when we go into a forest and manage white oak, we're doing a lot for other trees as well. We're managing upland oaks and the overall health of the upland hardwood forest in general. White oak has a wide range, as you can see. The darker areas are the most white oak dominated forests. Kentucky, especially in the east and the Appalachians, has a very dense white oak population. And even as you move to central Kentucky, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot, but really on the ground, white oak is a part of almost every forest. Missouri, of course, we're in the central area of the white oak region. And, we all are very familiar and very aware of white oak and its importance. So this graph tells you a little bit about what's going on in the woods. And by that, I mean, as you can see, the bars are very tall near the middle and to the right. That is in millions of acres, how many acres we have within the white oak region in our central core area, 6 states between Missouri, Illinois, Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, West Virginia. We've got approximately 50 years and older, there are approximately 20 million acres of white oak forests. However, on the left, you can see that that's not the case. There are very fewer acres. That's the region where we're okay now. There's plenty of white oaks to go around. We're not in a shortfall. However, this is what's going to be replacing those in 50 years. Now, this graph slides to the right. As time goes by and we age, this circle will be sliding to the right, and there's not enough acres to replace the acreages that are there currently. And that's where our problem resides. This tells it a little bit differently. The blue bar is a representation of what we have now in the forest. And once again, we have plenty of white oak to go around. There's not an issue. However, if you take that younger, that white oak age class, less than 30 years, and project that out for 50 years. So we're looking at 50 to 100 years. The lined bars are the ones that replace the current acreages, and it's not going to be enough. So we're going to experience, if things are left unchecked, a bottleneck of the white oak resource in the future. So why is the lack of regeneration occurring now? Why are we just figuring this out? Of course, researchers have known for 30 years that still it's a problem. Well, historically, we've had wildfires, grazing that sort of kept the understory in check from competition. And that's something that changed in the early 1900s. We started putting out fires, fire management, grazing. We had fences that changed things in the forest a little bit. So as the fire and grazing decreased, the understory species that outcompete white oaks, like maple and beech and others, that grow well in the shade, they became more abundant. They became more dominant slowly over time. And they can easily shade out these young, small oak seedlings, which grow very slow comparatively. So as forests are harvested, there are already very few oaks in the understory ready to take off and compete for dominance. So with that lack of numbers combined with the slow growth of white oak, over time, you have this problem. So this is a graph that shows the shade tolerance of oaks. And notice that their oaks are sort of scattered throughout the middle. They're moderately shade tolerant. They can handle a little bit. Luckily, white oak is in that more tolerant spectrum of all the oaks. So it can handle shade. That's a good thing, because on the right side represents deep shade. Now that's not cloud cover. That's the canopy of the forest that is so tight that it closes up and doesn't allow sunlight into the forest floor, as opposed to the left side of the graph, which represents a very thin canopy of mature trees. Therefore, you get full sunlight or near full sunlight at the forest floor. So among the most tolerant species are beech trees, sugar maple, red maple, and those typically will outcompete oaks just because of that shade tolerance. They're able to grow in shade, and they're ready whenever there's a disturbance, such as a timber harvest. Yellow poplar, on the other hand, needs full sun. However, in full sun situations, yellow poplar is so numerous and so fast growing, it also shades out oaks. I told myself I wasn't going to reference the analogy of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, but if you have full sun, it's too much sun. If you have full shade, it's too much shade. However, partial shade is just right. And that means that we need to coax these oaks to get slightly larger than just seedling size if they're going to have a chance at succeeding in the forest. So what that means is oak stand development, newly emerged seedlings become a mature tree. Well, that sounds easy, but that's not exactly the way it happens. There are a lot of things between that little seedling becoming a mature, majestic tree of the forest that need to occur, as far as disturbances, amounts of sunlight, and shade. So we need to take this in stages. We need to develop these little seedlings, which are 1 foot tall or smaller, into what we call advanced regeneration. Advanced regeneration we think of as being about 4 feet in height. It may be 5 to 10 years old. Usually that's about the time it takes to plan for regeneration to be ready to take over as the next healthy forest. But some of this regeneration may be 30 years old because the sprouting, the root sprouting that oaks are known for, with the previous fires and the cattle grazing. These oaks would re-sprout for years and even decades in order to be ready to take off whenever an opportunity arises. So the first thing we do is we need to give these seedlings just a little bit of sunlight to not allow other sun-loving trees to outcompete them, but then to also allow oaks enough to grow and develop into this advanced regeneration. So we limit the sunlight. Once it becomes advanced regeneration, then we need to take it to the next level. We need to open up the sunlight and release these trees and give them the room overhead to let them grow tall and straight. That's what we want. As you can see on the right, that's a pole-sized tree, somewhere between 5 and 10 inches in diameter. And that is basically recruitment of advanced regeneration seedlings into the next size class. So full sunlight, once again, is key for this release event to be successful. And there are going to be trees that make it into the mix that are perhaps undesirable, such as the red maple in the middle. There are 2 nice looking white oaks on the left and on the right. However, there's a red maple in the middle. This is part of a forest practice where we can select and release crop trees. And depending on the type of forest we want and the mixture of species we're looking for, we could come in here with equipment and get rid of these trees like this red maple with a hatchet, chainsaw, herbicide, a combination of those things, and make sure that the white oaks are the ones that win the race. Make sure that the white oaks are the ones that are still here in the forest floor 20 years from now. Because if left unchecked, the red maple is going to win most of the time because it's faster growing and it'll outcompete the white oaks and other upland oaks. So we have to continue monitoring. We have to continue management in our forests. We can't just assume that little seedlings will develop themselves into a mature forest. So in a way, the seedlings do become the mature forest, the mature trees of the forest. However, there's a lot that goes in the mix that is part of that process. We understand it. We need to make sure that we manage our forests and we provide landowners with the means to manage their forests. These entities here are very familiar to us. Kentucky Division of Forestry, they can provide foresters who come out free of charge and will help you manage. The Kentucky Association of Consulting Foresters, KACF.org, they work with regeneration all the time. They know how to get cost share money, which can help landowners handle the cost of these practices. And of course, you can always contact me, and I will put my email in the chat pod momentarily with any questions that you have about forest management, white oak management. If I don't know the answer, I can definitely forward you to someone who does.
That sounds great. Thank you, Darren. We greatly appreciate that presentation.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to kind of follow how the White Oak Initiative is progressing, and y'all are doing some good work in there, Darren. So thank you for sharing.
Sure.
All right. Well, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat pod. So I guess, Darren, you've answered all their questions. So we don't...
you did a great job.
You did a great job.
Good.
All right, Darren. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
it.
sir, very much.
And I'm sure we'll have you on again some other time.
Oh yeah, as that thing continues to evolve and expand, yeah, we got to keep everybody current on what's going on with it.
Definitely. All right, so moving on, we have Lori Thomas coming up and to talk about the tree of the week. And so I'm wondering what we're going to talk about.
Oh, gee, what do you think? Since
what should we talk about today?
That makes sense.
We kicked it off with the White Oak Initiative, so I thought white oak would be a great Quercus alba would be a great tree of the week to do for this week. So here is Quercus alba white oak.
Wonderful.
I'm Lori Thomas with the University of Kentucky Forestry and Natural Resources Extension, and I'm here with the tree of the week, the white oak. White oak, Quercus alba, is an outstanding tree among all trees. It is the most important lumber tree of the white oak group. It is a large tree, typically growing 80 to 100 feet tall, and on really good sites it may grow well over 100 feet tall with a diameter greater than 5 feet. White oak is slow growing and long-lived, living up to 400 to 500 years. White oak is native to the eastern and midwestern United States. It grows on many sites and soil types, but grows best in deep, moist, well-drained soils of coves or higher bottomlands. In the southern Appalachians, it exhibits best growth on north-facing lower slopes and in coves. White oak is generally classed as intermediate in tolerance to the shade. It is most shade-tolerant in youth and becomes less tolerant as the tree grows larger. White oak is monoecious, meaning one house, which means a tree will have both male and female flowers. The male flowers are yellow-green, borne in drooping, slender catkins that are about 2 to 4 inches long, and the female flowers are reddish-green and appear as a very small single spike. The flowers emerge with the leaves in mid-spring, and the flowers are wind-pollinated. The leaves are deciduous and alternately arranged on the twig, as you can see in the photo, and they are simple in form, which means they are made up of one blade. They are rose-colored when they unfurl in the early spring, and they mature to a darker green. They are typically 4 to 7 inches long with 7 to 10 rounded lobes. You can tell white oak leaves from red oak leaves by the lobes. The lobes of white oaks, that's the leaf at the top of the photo, are rounded, and the lobes of the red oak, that's at the bottom of the photo, have bristle tips. Fall color is usually attractive, ranging from rich red to a reddish brown. The fruit of the white oak is an oblong acorn with a warty, bowl-shaped cap. The cap detaches at maturity. As the acorn matures, it changes in color from green to brown. Acorns mature in one growing season and germinate almost immediately after falling to the ground in September to October. White oak can produce seeds prolifically, but good acorn crops are irregular and occur only every 4 to 10 years. Trees normally bear seeds between the ages of 50 and 200 years. Wind and gravity aid in the dispersal of the acorns. Wildlife is also responsible for acorn dispersal, including blue jays and gray squirrels. Both are effective in dispersing the seed a distance from the parent. We know that from the tiny acorn a mighty oak tree grows, and according to the National Wildlife Federation, oaks are one of the top 10 trees for wildlife because they help wildlife grow. Oaks serve as a host tree for more than 500 different lepidopteran larvae, including dagger moths and the giant silk moth. These larvae in turn feed the seasonal migratory songbirds, such as our warblers. These trees also provide critical nesting habitat for many of our cavity nesters, including the white-breasted nuthatch. The white oak provides good cover for a variety of mammals as well because the leaves typically persist longer than other plant associates. The acorns are also an important wildlife food and are consumed by more than 100 different vertebrates, including birds such as wild turkey, blue jays, northern bobwhite, wood duck, and ruffed grouse. Mammals that eat the acorns include red squirrel, rabbits, and black bear. In some areas, black bear's reproductive success is affected by the success or failure of the acorn crop. The bark is light ashy gray and can be very variable in appearance. On small to medium-sized trees, it's often broken up into small, aligned blocks which are scaly on the surface. As the tree matures, the bark is irregularly plated and deeply fissured. The heartwood is typically a light to medium brown, and the sapwood is light brown. The grain is straight with a coarse, uneven texture. Oaks are ring porous with rows of large, early wood pores which are formed in the spring, and rows of smaller late wood pores, which is the wood that's formed later in the season, and you can see that in the photo. In white oak, these pores are filled with tyloses, which makes this wood desirable for use in making barrels that contain liquid because it will not leak out. However, the pores in red oaks are open, which is a good characteristic to help identify red oak wood from white oak wood, as you can see in the photo. White oak is commercially a very important wood. The wood is used for furniture, cabinetry, veneer, paneling, and flooring. White oak wood is also integral in the bourbon industry. For bourbon to be considered bourbon, it must be aged in charred, new oak barrels made from white oak. Kentucky is considered the birthplace of bourbon, crafting 95% of the world's supply. 1.7 million barrels were filled last year for a total of 7.5 million barrels, the highest inventory in more than 40 years. The national champion white oak as of 2021 is in Brunswick, Virginia. It is 331 inches in circumference, 90 feet tall, with a 120-foot crown spread. The Kentucky champion white oak is in Warren County. It is 228 inches in circumference, 112 feet tall, with a 119-foot crown spread. If you'd like to know more about champion trees, check out American Forest Champion Tree Register or check out the Kentucky Division of Forestry Champion Trees. Now for a few fun facts about white oak. The white oak is the state tree of Connecticut, Illinois, and Maryland. Connecticut's state quarter was minted with a picture and inscription of a famous white oak tree, the Charter Oak. Maryland's Y oak was long recognized as the largest white oak tree in the nation. It was estimated to be more than 500 years old when it came down in a storm in 2002. The scientific name for white oak is Quercus alba. Quercus is the Latin name for the oak tree, and alba is Latin for white, referring to the light-colored bark. I hope you've enjoyed learning about the mighty white oak and have a chance to get out into your neighborhood, a local park, or your woodland and appreciate the wonders of the white oak.
Well, thank you, Lori. We greatly appreciate you doing that. And, one thing I was wondering is how many different types of white oaks do we have in Kentucky?
In Kentucky, we have about 7 different kinds of white oaks, and we have about 13 different kinds of red oaks. And as far as North America goes, we have about 70 different species of oak in North America. So we are the oak hickory forest. I mean, that's our forest type here in Kentucky, and it makes up a good portion of our forest. They're very prevalent out there. So yeah, white oaks, great.
Yeah. We also had someone say that if they wanted to plant white oaks in an open area of their farm, should they also plant yellow poplar first as a cover crop? And I don't know if that's...
I don't know. Let's see what Darren says.
Yeah, Darren, get back on and says, are there other sun-loving trees that should be used to mix in to optimize oak success?
Yeah, it's Darren. There it's Darren.
Yeah. Okay, so really most of the plantings that I've been involved with and that I've seen are almost all inclusive as oaks. That doesn't have to be the case. Soil type, existing vegetation, maintenance needs, things like that, accessibility, all that goes into play when you plan out your planting. And now, having said that, yellow poplar is going to outcompete the oaks, as will a lot of other non-oak species. So plan on follow-up 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And do some management, some crop tree release. But most of the plantings that I've seen are oaks, white oak, maybe mixed with northern red and southern red and some of the other upland oaks.
Darren, I think it's always probably just good advice for landowners if they're interested in doing tree plantings to work with a professional, right? And get out there, because each site's a little bit different, as you indicated, and and the conditions are a little bit different. Landowners' goals are a little bit different. But by working with a professional on your own property, they're going to be able to fine tune kind of that species mix for what you're looking for. So,
yeah, there have been a lot of times, Billy, where I thought I knew how the planting was going to go. I knew the soil type, I knew the landowner's interest, and then when I got out on site, things changed because of local conditions and just the whole process. Right. So I definitely consider getting a forester out there and talking this over, because this is a project that's going to last for decades.
No doubt. And if you're going to go through all that effort and energy to do a tree planting, you want to do everything you can to make it successful. And, as Darren mentioned before, we also have some cost share programs that are available to help offset the costs and expenses of some of these things. So work with your local professional forester, and you're more likely to have a successful planting for sure.
And I know, Lori, I saw that you answered this in the chat, but just for people who's actually viewing this, it said they wanted to know if there are other champion trees, what other trees are included.
So if you go to American Forest, or just type in Google national champion trees, and it's going to come up, and there is a national champion for, and I won't say all of them because there's a few, we do have some species that are missing that haven't been identified, but many, 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 many species that we find in North America. And the same goes for Kentucky. So if you check out the Kentucky Division of Forestry champion trees, they list all of the champion trees we have here in the state. And there's a few species out there that we don't have. And it's usually kind of some of those smaller, more understory species that a national champion's not been identified. But any of your major species or our larger trees, there's one listed in there too. So yeah, check it out. It's a lot of fun, especially looking at the Kentucky ones to see if there's one that's near you. And if it's on public property, you could go see it. A lot of them actually are on public property or at a church or a cemetery that they can be seen at.
Mm-hmm. All right, great.
Excellent.
I was going to say there was another comment in a chat pod about creating a species management calendar. It provides a timeline for what to do with different species. That's a good suggestion. We'll take that under advisement. Maybe it's something we could start with the White Oak Initiative and some of those. So thanks for the comment there, and we'll certainly consider it. Thank you.
All right, so moving on.
I know, a little away from White Oak. Yeah.
Alan, how are you this morning?
Doing great. How are you all?
Doing well. So
we are so lucky today to be joined by Joyce Bender, who's been on the show before, and some of you might recognize, but if you don't, Joyce managed the State Nature Preserve System for the Kentucky State Nature Preserve Commission for 31 years.
Wow.
Now that she is retired, her focus continues to be maintaining high quality examples of Kentucky's natural areas and engaging the public so that they can find connections that inspire them to value those areas. And so Joyce and I got together and we visited one of those natural areas recently. And she also talked a little bit about, the different ecoregions of Kentucky. And so that's what we're going to talk about today.
Wonderful.
Everyone, I'm going to talk to you today about the natural regions of Kentucky as part of the Master Naturalist program. And I know that if you've traveled from one end of our state to the other, you notice that there is a lot of different landscapes that you're viewing through the windshield. So just so you know a little bit about my background, I was fortunate enough to manage the State Nature Preserve System for 31 years. And so I had the good fortune to be paid to travel around the state and look after a wonderful suite of nature preserves and natural areas, and keep an eye on a lot of really cool plants and animals, not all of which are rare, but they're just stunningly beautiful. And I think that the treasures that are out there can be found not only on some of these great natural areas, but in your local community. It just got to get outside and go find them. And so hopefully this will help you interpret where to go to see some of the rarer ones. Of the physiographic provinces that are in the Southeast, Kentucky has 3 of those. The coastal plain, the interior low plateaus, and the Appalachian highlands. Within these are the natural regions that I mentioned earlier, and there are 9 of those. These areas within them share a general similarity in their geology and topography and the hydrology and the soils and the climate and the vegetation that makes them rather unique. When you're talking about geology, the substrates influence species distribution and composition. And that's, you've got things that grow on acid soils, sandstone derivatives, and you have things that grow on limestone soils, which are more basic. The karst and cave distribution in the state of Kentucky is somewhat unique and important to take into consideration, because we have limestone that throughout the state where it is found has been sculpted through erosion and dissolution by water. And so we have some really interesting formations of springs in addition to caves and sinkholes. So there's more to this, and karst really plays a big role in the distribution of a number of species. The lack of surface water means that species have to adapt to other means of survival. And topography is really critical as well. We have mountains in the southeastern part of the state, and we have low wetlands in the western part of the state. So looking at the topography, you're going to have an influence on species distribution from that as well. And rainfall has a key role to play in how plants are distributed in this state as well. Or snow, if you want to think about the top of Black Mountain. The amount of snowfall there is unrivaled in the state. The amount of annual precipitation that we find in other regions of the state also have a role to play in replenishing water in our wetlands, for example. And temperature. If you are a gardener, you know something about how many good days there are in the year for growing things, and the last day of frost and the first day of frost in the fall. So the temperature differences in the state are varied, and the species that occur there as well. So we're giving you all these definitions, and another one to throw at you is natural communities. And that is defined basically as distinct groups of plants and animals that repeat across the landscape in a recognizable pattern. Wherever these similar environmental conditions are met, that they can coalesce in that way. There are a number of factors that shape natural communities. The geology, is it sandstone? Is it limestone that the species are growing on? Perhaps shale? The soil, what is the soil's depth? What is the pH of that soil? Are the soils nutrient rich or poor? What kind of drainage is there? Is it really dry soil? Is it really mucky, heavy soil that just holds on to moisture? The hydrology, is it saturated? Does it flood frequently? Those are important factors as well. And the landscape position, the aspect and slope also has influence on how we see species distributed across the landscape. And this illustration is a really good one to just talk about natural communities that are affected by north face conditions or south face conditions. The north face tend to be cooler and perhaps more mesic, and then if you're on a south face where the sun strikes most of the day, it'll tend to be drier, and that has an influence to play. Also with regards to how water moves in those instances, so drainage patterns, erosion, all of that has to come into play when you're looking at the topography and aspect. And of course there are regional influences on the flora that we have here in Kentucky, and the northern temperate forest is recognized, as well as the Midwestern prairie, the coastal plain, and the Appalachian Mountains have all had an influence on species movement into the state and establishment. This next picture is an eye-opening one in my book. This is a map that shows Kentucky prior to settlement by Europeans, and you can see the vast areas of dark green that are the forested cover, the grasslands that are situated in the in the south central part of the state, and notice all of the wetlands. That's really the key when I show you this next image, which shows Kentucky now. And you can see that we have lost most of the wetlands that were there. 1% of grasslands are still found in the state, just 1% or even less, to be honest with you. And we have lost about 80% or more of the wetlands that were in this state. And so that has had a drastic impact on what is still here to see in a natural state. So we'll go there to those wetlands that are disappearing rapidly. And the first is the coastal plain province. And that has to do with the Mississippi and Ohio River floodplains. They're characterized by having nearly level, poorly drained lowlands. It's the youngest region in our state in terms of geologic time. The ocean covered this area as recently as 70 million years ago. I know that seems like a long time ago, but when you consider how old the planet is, it's really kind of a blink of an eye. The East Gulf coastal plain is characterized by seeps and sphagnum, which is just very acidic. And there are species of plants that are found there that you wouldn't find in other locations, again, because of saturated soils and distribution of these species on the landscape, including cottonmouth snakes, which really seem to like the hills and bluffs above these wetlands in the Gulf coastal plain. The interior low plateaus province has the majority of the natural regions that we're going to talk about today. That is a lot of habitat that is bluffs and plateaus. They are most of this land is hilly or rolling, and so that's kind of a characteristic of the interior low plateaus province. We're still dealing with some floodplains here within this province, and these are the ones that are along the Ohio River and up to Owensboro. These are bottomland forest community types. They're found on flat bottomlands adjoining large streams or rivers such as the Ohio River. Their herbaceous layer is hydrophytic vegetation, which means that it's very much saturated. A lot of forbs and sedges in this kind of habitat. The soil is poorly drained, and the water table is above or at the surface much of the year. The Shawnee Hills is a very fascinating part of the state. The age of the sandstone is Pennsylvanian, and it's massive, and so there are a lot of bluffs that characterize portions of this region. A common natural community type found within this is the acidic xeric forest or woodland, and there are a number of species that are common to the canopy, and a lot of times because it's so dry in these settings with the soil almost non-existent or very close to the surface with the bedrock, that you have species that can really withstand some punishment in regards to moisture and nutrients. So chestnut oaks, post oak, blackjack oak, species like that that can really tolerate those kind of conditions are most common. And then you'll find things like poverty grass, a lot of lichens and moss that grow on these sandstone rocks. Again, it's a place where you can find glades. In this instance, they would be sandstone glades. And the example that we have here is the sandstone glade for the Shawnee Hills. And you can see that there are a lot of lichens in this picture. There's a lot of rock outcropping, minimal soil, and where there is soil, you'll see that the grasses have gotten themselves established. And many times in these situations, the grasses are just annual grasses that really just come up and flower and seed and die back. It'd be really hard to sustain a perennial root system in these very thin soils with such dry conditions as are found in these sandstone glades. The Highland Rim is the next natural region that we're going to talk about, and this is where the big prairie remnants are located in the state. The Big Barrens area is part of this system, and as historically fires would have swept through this whole area because there's not a lot of surface streams. And if you look on a map, it's a big horseshoe area on the map that if you look at a map that talks about the hydrology, you'll see that there's hardly a surface stream within that. So this is an area that fire would have swept across without a lot of interference from stream systems to slow it down or stop it. So this area burned the most in the state of Kentucky, and that kept a lot of the grasslands intact and functional because there wasn't a lot of trees to shade out all of the prairie-loving species. A very unique natural community within this region is limestone flat rock glades. And this is a very interesting setup. There's a place we have protected down in Simpson County that has just basically a limestone pavement, and within that there are soil pockets that have very, very rare species in them, including the necklace glade cress, shown here as the white flower, and the beautiful little magenta flower, which is called flower of an hour. It opens up for a brief period of time every day, and then the flower petals close back up. And these species, again, just live in these little soil pockets where there's a lot of really harsh conditions to grow in. It's saturated in the winter and then baked dry in the summertime. The next region is the knobs, and this is a very distinctive area in our state. If you're traveling out of the bluegrass region, you have to go through the knobs in any direction but north. So this is a distinctive region. The hills are somewhat conical in shape. There's ridge systems that intervene between these cones that you see. It's a very distinct region, and the fact that the area has gone through such erosion, it's made those distinctive cones, or little volcano hills, if you will, that you see. And it was basically from stream erosion. This was a flat plateau, and through the force of water eroding all of this, the resistant sandstone caprock that's still present at the top of the cone wore away at a different rate than the underlying shales and siltstones and rocks that could not resist the erosion forces. And so it shows very plainly these conical shapes all across the region, and it just looks like little sentinels encircling the bluegrass region. The typical community type that you would see in the knobs is more of an oak pine community. The oak species again tend to be the ones that can withstand the drier conditions on ridges and rocky slopes, and the Virginia pine is the predominant pine in many of these systems. There are, however, some beautiful mesic forests represented in the north-facing slopes and coves of the knobs region, and one of those is at Vernon Douglas State Nature Preserve near Elizabethtown. And if you ever have a chance, it's a beautiful place to go and see really massive old growth trees. So that leaves us the bluegrass region, and that is level lands to gently rolling to the entrenched cliff-lined rivers and streams that we see. The tributaries to the Kentucky River have cut down through the bedrock and make these amazing little gorges along the stretch of the Kentucky River Palisades. The area has some of the richest soils and has been settled the longest, so we have the least good examples in this region of the state, just because there's been so much disturbance for so very long with settlement by Europeans. The Kentucky River Palisades that stretches for 100 miles is one of the most distinct features that you will see in the region of the inner bluegrass. And in many instances, it is the last area that has been developed because it's so rugged and rough and rocky with the cliffs that some places here have some of the only intact forests that you'll find for the inner bluegrass of any extent. The oldest bedrock in the state is also exposed here in the Palisades region. The Ordovician limestones are 450 million years in age, and they're found basically at the water line in the Palisades. There are a number of interesting community types, but a common one that's very rich and that most people go hiking in is the calcareous mesophytic forest. And that is characterized by ashes and oaks and sugar maple with buckeye, bitternut, hickories, black walnuts as well, and a rich flora on the forest floor, which is what really appeals to so many people in the springtime in this part of the state. You can see a wide variety of beautiful spring wildflowers. The outer bluegrass region is bumps into the knobs, and it is underlain by Ordovician and Silurian age limestones, and there is a little bit more moderate relief than the rolling to level areas that you see in the inner bluegrass region. Our last province, physiographic province, is the Appalachian Highlands, and that is the eastern portion of the state, and it is constituted by the Appalachian Plateaus and the Cumberland Mountains. And the Appalachian Plateaus are characterized by being really deeply eroded plateaus with steep hills and narrow stream valleys. And so as you travel towards the Red River Gorge, you'll see where it's flat on the top, but there's deeply dissected river streams and corridors that are characteristic of that. Additionally, the sandstones here are Pennsylvanian, and they are very characteristic of what you'd see in the Red River Gorge, for example. Massive sandstone, beautiful arches, again with very narrow stream valleys in between. The Cumberland Mountains are some of the most unique biodiversity in our state because of the altitude that you're at, and also the fact that it's influenced by being part of the Appalachian mountain chain. And the species there that you would encounter are typical of southern and northern Appalachian systems. So it's kind of, our Cumberland Mountains are central in the Appalachian chain, and they reflect that. So you can get some southern species and some northern ones mixing along there. Included in this region are Pine, Cumberland, and Black Mountains. Black Mountain is the highest elevation, and it definitely is indicated by some of the natural communities that you will see at those elevations. There are species that nest there that we don't have anywhere else in the state that will nest because they've got to fly onto a more northern climate. But for example, Blackburnian warblers will nest on the top of Black Mountain. Otherwise, you won't find them nesting. They pass through our state during migration, but they don't nest here. But conditions are met on the top of this mountain. And it definitely serves as a migration corridor. The backbone of these mountains provides good flying conditions, and I've been up there viewing hawks during migration, and lo and behold, here comes a monarch butterfly. So it's used by flying creatures as well as earthbound. The elk and the bear that have moved through our state they move along that mountain chain. So it's a great corridor for species movement.
Wow. Well, thank you, Joyce, for giving us that virtual tour of the state. That was awesome.
Yes, that was wonderful. I really loved that video. And you know that Kentucky is such a beautiful state. And I know we have Joyce on the line with us too, but I was wondering if there are some favorite places to visit during this time of year that might be something good for folks to check out.
Well, it's so hard to give an overview when there's so much detail I can't even talk about with these places. But I'd say that if you're in the east, as we get into the fall time, certainly get up high where you can watch the colors change. And if you are a good hiker, you can go to Bad Branch and hike to High Rock. And it's a 7.5 mile loop. So be ready for a day of adventure for that. But if you don't want to hike that far, you can go to Powell County and hike to the top of Pilot Knob and get great views there. Vernon Douglas, I mentioned in the video, and that is a really wonderful place that is in near Elizabethtown. And there are certainly places further west, like Logan County Glade in Russellville. And if you really enjoy just peace and serenity, going out to Metropolis Lake west of Paducah is also a great place to go. And up east in Greenup County, the Jesse Stewart Nature Preserve is over 700 acres and really nice hiking there. And of course, any of these places are good year round. Spring wildflowers are great. If you're a bird watcher, you just like to see the color or just immerse yourself in a cool green forest, there's plenty of places to go.
That sounds great. And
I know, I'm so jealous, Joyce. You've seen so many beautiful places. I've had the privilege to travel across Kentucky, but I know you've seen so much more than I have. But thank you so much for sharing that. That was awesome. I feel like I got a good overview of the whole state, and I know our viewers had to really enjoy that as well.
And
Well,
Joyce, you're a key part of the new Kentucky Master Naturalist program as well. So if you liked what you saw, check out the Master Naturalist program, because you'll get to hear from Joyce and others about our natural areas and how you can, better be protecting them and, taking care of them into the future. Joyce, is there anything kind of tips that you'd have for our viewers, things that, in your travels, you'd really recommend, they do to be better stewards of their environment?
Well, the other thing I spend a lot of time on is invasive species awareness. And so if you do hike a lot of different places, make sure there's no hitchhikers on your shoes, in the treads of your boot, sticking to the laces of your boot or on your pant legs. Make sure you clean yourself off before you go to the next great place. And when you're there, stay on the trail. It's there for the benefit of your safe passage through the property. But if you're interested in helping with managing for invasive species, or even just saying, hey, man, I could pick up trash or help fix this bridge where the railing is loose, get a hold of whatever organization manages the natural areas near you. They need your help, because there's always budget cuts and always a limit on staff expertise and time. So if you are wanting to give back, and those of us who enjoyed nature so much during the height of COVID, your willingness to do that kind of work is going to be appreciated by not only the managers of those areas, but the other users of the property. So please consider giving a hand. And the Master Naturalist program is a great way to learn more about all of this. It goes into much more depth, and you get to also have the opportunity to give back through service through the Master Naturalist program. So all of that's a great way to show that you really do appreciate the beauty of our glorious state. I moved here back in 1986, and I thought, I'll hang out here a couple of years. And I'll tell you what, I'm here all these years later, because this is one of the most beautiful places I have ever lived. And I just enjoy getting out there and telling people about it. So I hope you all enjoyed this enough to inspire you to get out there and do something too.
Definitely, you sure did inspire me. And so, as always, just really appreciate all that you do. I appreciate you being on the show today, as well as, going out with me to some of these natural areas. And we have one more video, not today, but we'll have to show the viewers some other time, of the site that we visited, Pine Creek Barrens, which was a really cool location, as well as hopefully get some others for you this fall.
wonderful.
Let's do it.
Yeah. And if you're curious, folks, Laurie dropped the link for the Kentucky Master Naturalist program into the chat pod. So check that out.
We have a fall training starting in September, a series of different, if you liked this, imagine you not only get to hear from Joyce, but you get to hear from, Gwen Henderson, who's an expert in archaeology. You get to hear from Blake Newton, who knows all about insects, all sorts of different great speakers and different topics related to the natural world. So if that sounds cool to you, check out the Master Naturalist program.
All right. Well, thank you, Ellen,
Thanks,
for
Joyce.
being
Yeah,
on today.
yeah,
And
Thank you.
Joyce, we greatly appreciate it.
As always, keep up the good fight, Joyce.
I will. You guys too. Thanks for all you do.
Teamwork makes the dream work, we say around here, but thank you.
Oh, we did have one question of if you can
Uh-oh.
attend a second time around, I guess, for Master Naturalist, Lori or Ellen, or can you still answer that for us?
You certainly could. You're welcome to attend. For Lori, for agents, you're welcome to attend. There's $100 charge for the general public for this program, but we do have lots of scholarships available. So if anyone's interested in attending, just reach out. Let us know if you have any questions. And Lori, I'll put that in PERS again for any agents who feel like joining.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great program. Make sure y'all check that out.
Well, Billy, I told you we had everything from woods to water. And actually, she did talk a little bit about wildlife. So, we had it all.
We did. And Joyce took us from Paducah to Pikeville. So
I know. In a span of 20 minutes. That's awesome.
We covered a lot of Kentucky, and a great state. And just a reminder for our viewers: if you are a landowner, there's so many groups out there and organizations that are available to work with you and to help you get the most out of your property. So take advantage of those resources. And as always, if you've got questions or things you'd like to see on the show, Renee, they can let us know about that.
Yeah, they can. They can go to fromthewoodstoday.com, and there's a little survey there you can click on, and you can even upload pictures. Say, I found this snake, or I have this wildflower. How do I do this, or how do I do that? And we will try to get it answered, and you never know when we're going to use it on the show. We've done it before. I'm sure we'll do it again.
Yeah, no doubt. But we do appreciate y'all being with us each week, and please help us spread the word. We think there's others that would enjoy it. And, we'll look forward to seeing you all again next week and From the Woods Today.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.